Tom Cruise.
Wouldn't you do it?
All right,
you wouldn't talk to him about Scientology?
No, I would, 100%. I'd just be afraid that he would brainwash me with his like piercing blue eyes, and I'd like.
You know, he's like 4'2", right?
Oh yeah, but I would kneel down to look into his eyes, and then I'd be mortgaging my house to level up in Scientology. All right, L. Ron, take me away.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with Jon and Nat Turney.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. This is Nat, your humble and yet magnanimous host, with my illustrious, estimable, follically endowed older brother, Jon. I said it, Jon. Follically endowed.
Follically endowed. I don't even know how to respond to that.
I didn't say well, follically endowed.
Yeah, I know you didn't say well. Because if you saw, I cover it with a hat on purpose. It's the power of the cap, right? You know about the power of the cap.
Oh, yeah. Well, George Costanza made that very clear in Seinfeld.
The power of the cap.
That we were all born in the wrong century because the 20s and the 30s were a bald man's dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get you.
There's a camera where I work that I catch myself on from time to time, and it's a shot straight down.
I hate those.
It's super embarrassing. And
do you ever have those like holy shit moments?
Exactly. Well, for a long time, because
guy?
You can't see the top of your own head, right?
I know.
So for a long time, I lived in complete and lovely ignorance. And then I was like, I have to look at this camera for loss prevention reasons. So I'm looking at this camera, and I'm like, holy crap! Why didn't anybody tell me I have that baloney patch on the top of my head? Like, what the fuck is that? Nobody tells me. And so from this point on, I only hang around with people shorter than me, so they can't see it.
That's right. Well, so this is not even remotely what we got on the podcast to talk about. But what the hell? This is how we roll.
Yep.
But so let's tell our bald epiphany stories. You just told yours. That's good.
Right.
Mine happened differently. So
okay,
and yet similarly. So years ago now, this has been probably at least 10 or 12 years ago on a road trip with Stephen and Aiden, the whole family, right? But Stephen and Aiden we stopped off at a rest area and we played catch with a football, right? And we were still using cameras then. So someone's out there clicking, click, click, click. And then, sometime later we get the film developed. And I'm going through these pictures and there's this bald dude playing catch with my kids. And it's been long enough. I literally asked the question, who the hell's throwing the football to the kids? And they're like, Dad, that's you. I'm like, no. And I said to say, how come nobody told me? Because I can still feel hair back there. So I'm laboring under the delusion that I'm just, I've got a receding hairline. No, dude, you're freaking bald, like Friar Tuck bald. So there you go. It was heartbreaking. I was crushed. And then, like you, I try to hang around people who are shorter than me who can't see it. So, but here,
I'm still living in denial. I mean, you can see, people you guys can't see the video, but I got this long hair. I got these long flowing locks.
Yeah. You are the Gallagher of podcasting.
Pretty much. Yes. If I was to take this hat off right now, yeah, it would be a completely different.
The only difference is you don't have hair attached to your hat to add volume.
That is true. That might be coming soon. You never know.
Maybe you just need to lean into this whole Gallagher of podcasting thing and start bringing props to the show.
Yeah,
things to smash other things with.
I can get a big hammer.
Can you get a sledge-o-matic?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I can get one on eBay.
Oh, you can.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, if you've stuck around this long, first of all, bravo.
Yeah, really.
Your diligence and your tenacity will be, well, I was going to say well rewarded, but I can't make that promise.
No.
But we're just, Jon and I just decided that we would get together and we would talk about 2021, our sort of, what's the word, Jon? Our odyssey in podcasting.
Yeah. I mean, I think we both went into this completely blind with no idea what we were doing. And I think it's painfully obvious from the first few episodes that we didn't know what we were doing.
Well, let's just talk about that. And I have a list of things. I thought a handful of things, and see where the conversation takes us. But that was actually one of my first questions I was going to ask you is what was the biggest, for the lack of a better or less profane term, what was your biggest kind of oh shit moment when we first started.
Well, I mean, I think you and I have listened to podcasts, and we've actually been on other podcasts. And so we have these ideas that they make it sound like it's easy.
Yeah.
Heretic Happy Hour, which is one of the podcasts that I listen to pretty regularly. I had no idea that they had an editor, right? So I'm assuming that this is just something they're doing for fun. So I'd say the biggest oh shit moment for me was when I realized that you and I had to record all this. We had to come up with some kind of intro music, outro music, and then it had to be edited. So, as we're doing right now, there's a lot of uhs and wells, and there's points where we aren't talking because we're kind of just trying to figure out what we're thinking about. All that has to be kind of edited out.
Yeah.
To make it sound like we know what we're doing.
Right.
And I found out really, really fast that this was a full-time job, which I didn't really have time for. So I think the biggest epiphany for us was, and thank God Jason Elam came in the middle of this and said, "Hey, I'm taking a break from my podcast for a while. I have a friend who edits my podcast and he might need some more work. Why don't you reach out to him?" And
thank God for Jason.
And we've heard this before, and we've said this before, so this isn't anything new to anybody. I'd say the biggest oh shit moment for me was, oh crap, this is another full-time job that I just took on, and I'm not sure I have the time to do it. And then in the middle of all of this, you're trying to open up a coffee shop.
Well, yeah. Well, there was that little. I mean, it did kind of, that kind of got away from me a little bit. Well, and so I, from my perspective, you were the bigger champion of this than me. It was your idea. You pretty much said just, "Hey, I'll handle all this stuff. You just show up and try to not be dumb." And so I was blissfully unaware of how much work goes into it because I wasn't doing any of it. I was just showing up. My first sort of poop moment. See, I'll tone it down for the listeners. Was when I realized I had to go buy a new microphone because holy mackerel, that it wasn't cutting it,
Yeah.
And so just some of those things you don't think about. Now I look at who's that guy we had on, James Early, just not too long ago, and he's got a full blown podcast studio.
Yeah.
I have like podcast studio envy, dude.
Right.
I'm like, whoa, this guy looks like a pro.
Can you look behind me? I'm literally sitting in my son or my kid's game room right now.
Yeah, I'm sitting in my living room with a $100 Yeti mic and a laptop. So the beautiful thing is that the technology is such that you can have all that stuff if you want to.
Right.
I don't know that it adds a ton of quality.
Right.
And it won't make up for the fact that you might not have anything worthwhile to say. And so, woohoo, big, huge studio. That was not pointed at anyone, by the way. I'm just saying, in general, it won't make up for lack of content.
Sure.
Just because it sounds really good.
Oh, no.
So that was the biggest surprise for me was, first of all, how much work goes into making a podcast sound like it doesn't take a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like you listen to the Heretic Happy Hour, or you listen to Messy Spirituality, or you listen to whoever, and you go, wow, that just sounds effortless.
Right.
And some of that has to do with the personalities involved. There's that really easy interplay between Matt and Keith and Derek and whoever, Katie. And there is a real sense that those guys do like each other.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's not a put on. They're just genuinely, and they rib each other and they mess with each other. And I love that,
Well, and there's like Seth Price is another one that, Can I Say This at Church, which is a really, really good podcast. It was another one that when we were starting this, I looked at his podcast, and he was someone who has this like super dry sense of humor, almost to the point where, it's sarcastic, and if you aren't paying attention, you can kind of miss it. But he makes it sound so easy. But he's also very open about how hard it is to get to that point where it sounds easy. And that's something that I think we've also done pretty well is, Eric has done a really good job of making us sound smarter than we are in a way. I don't want to degrade our abilities and say that we're dumb, because we're not dumb. But we can say some pretty dumb things from time to time that need to be edited out. And Eric has been, it's like George Martin, right? With the Beatles, right? George Martin. Yeah. Without George Martin, I don't know if the Beatles would be who they were.
Right.
And honestly, without Eric, I don't know if we'd be who we are.
No, 100%. I mean, I'll tell you what, if we had to go based on the strength of the downloads alone in our first 3 episodes when we were doing the work ourselves, I think we'd have some people who listened and paid attention. I don't think it'd be very many. I wouldn't. I'd be like, no, these guys are cool. I like it. This sounds, but I can't get past the sort of the clunkiness of it all. So a guy like Eric comes along. But that being said, the first one we did, just you and me, I don't know, probably the roughest one. Because we didn't even really know what we were doing. We just kind of did that. We riffed on some stuff and improv most of it, kind of like we're doing now.
One of our lowest downloads.
Oh man. But, we had Brad Jersak on not too long later.
No, I mean, yeah.
We did a good job with him. I mean, he was good.
You did a really good job. You remember.
That's right. You were kicked off of that episode. There. That's right.
Okay, so that was another oh shit moment for me. I need a better computer.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I was using just one step up from a netbook, thinking that was going to do it. And it's like, okay, what do we need to buy? So I had already bought a pretty nice microphone, a Yeti, but I thought my little HP, whatever that piece of shit was going to handle it.
Yeah, and it was a big
for whatever reason, it did for our episode and for Jason's episode. I think I was a little glitchy in Jason's episode. And then I think we introduced video with Brad because we're like, okay, we want to have this, we want to be able to potentially use the video for Brad's episode. So I introduced video into that episode, and I basically spent the whole episode keeping my computer from crashing so you and Bradley could talk. I don't know if you know, I think we've talked about this, but I basically it was about every 30 seconds hitting a button saying, don't close this. Don't close this program. Don't close this. Don't close this. That's all I did for that hour whenever you guys talk. It was a little disheartening because Bradley Jersak is one of my heroes, and I definitely had things I wanted to talk about. You guys did a great job. I just was somewhat absent.
Well, then we got to have him back. So,
well, yeah, and then we had him back, which was awesome.
So we've had some moments there. I was also surprised, and it was, I guess, a pleasant. So there are those moments, that. You sometimes feel like you've bitten off more than you can chew, but there were some pleasant surprises too. And one of the pleasant surprises for me was how many people said yes.
Yeah.
So much so that I got a little cocky and I wasn't really prepared for the first
For a minute.
No.
I think I was too. I was
like, oh man, they all want to be on the show, but it was pretty much everybody we reached out to. And part of that was it became the definition of a good problem, which was, oh man, they've all said yes. Now we have to schedule all of these and get them all, booked and find time for everybody. And
isn't it another issue with I think Heretic Happy Hour does this too. We kind of sandbag episodes, right? So,
oh yeah.
But what we learned really quick is you kind of have to move some shit around, right? You want to help people. Part of our podcast is to help new authors, upcoming authors, people with new content. I thought it's just another one of those moments where it's I thought this would just all be linear. I thought we'd record and then every episode would go in order that we recorded them. And then you find out that doesn't really work because you want to help these people. You want to help them work with their product.
Well, right. I mean, if their book's going to drop next week, I don't want to drop the episode in a month and a half.
Right.
So we've made accommodations for folks that we know. I mean, Brian Zahn is a good example of his book was getting ready to go out. Jared Bias had a book coming out, right?
Jonathan Foster, whose episode just recently came down. And that's one of our most recent episodes that we interviewed and one of the most recent episodes we've dropped.
It was interesting because that was one, people ask me from time to time how we got some of the people because some of the people we got on, I was unaware that they were a little bit of a big deal. So Kristen Dumais was just about to drop Jesus and John Wayne in paperback. It had been out for a little while,
right?
In hardback, but and so when I reached out to her, it was perfect timing because she was like, well, my publisher's about to put out the paperback of this and we've revised it and added a few things. And yeah, if we could get this done before then, and that was the deal we made. It was like, absolutely, let's have you on. We'll make sure that we put this out in time for that to drop. And I think, she can come on the show later on and dispute this, but she was on the New York Times bestseller list. Coincidence? I don't think so.
It's because of us.
I'm thinking you owe at least a fraction of a percentage point of your success. No, but that was one of those ones that I knew of her, and she was her name got floated by one of our people in our private group. And it just was a list of people that were like, hey, this person. And I kind of shotgunned a lot of those out. And she was one that I was aware of. I knew the name. And then when we had her on, it was just like, she blew my freaking mind.
Yeah.
Like that was so good. Like I enjoyed every second of that conversation with her.
Yeah.
I always love talking to smart people. And then it wasn't just smart. It's this insight that she brings to stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because anyone can regurgitate information. She's interpreting that information in new ways and making you think and go, oh, I hadn't seen that before. Beth Allison Barr did a very similar thing for me, where I just was, man, I could have just, I made me wish I could have like gone to college and taken one of her classes, because I could sit and listen to her probably lecture for hours and just go, tell me more about this patriarchy. But it was, so that was cool. But it did get to a point where I kind of started to assume if I sent an email to somebody and invited them on the show, they were like, hell yes, when do we do this? And I got a few, I don't think I got any like absolutely no's.
Oh,
I got a few very polite blow-offs, and I got a few like I
got one absolute no.
Really?
It's one of our heroes. Yeah. And I really hope that someday that will change. But right now it's just a no.
I remember. Yeah, that was a no. Like a hell
Richard
no.
Rohr was a no. But with a caveat, right? His health isn't the greatest right now. And
the categorical no was not Richard Rohr.
Right.
The categorical no was somebody else that just doesn't do religious stuff anymore.
Even that one. Yeah.
Is that who you're thinking of? Or were you thinking of somebody else?
I was thinking Richard Rohr. Okay, so we can talk about. We won't name the name, I guess, because
it wasn't an ugly thing.
No, and
I didn't take it that way.
Even the absolute no's that we got, none of them were mean. None of them were who the hell are you and why are you emailing me? They were all like, no, I don't really do that anymore, which is the one you're talking about, which is someone who I still absolutely love. And he knows, I hope, that he still has an open invitation anytime he wants on this podcast.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know who it is, you don't know who it is. And that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
He knows who he is, and we love him. And I love his content. His content is always edgy, always pushing the boundaries of all of this. And for those of you who can't handle it, maybe it's time to get off the bus. But for those of you who understand what's going on, he's calling out religion for some pretty basic bullshit. And I absolutely love it. I know a lot of people don't. I do. I mean, Nat and I, we come at this from different points of views. I think somewhere at the base level, Nat and I are on the same page, but there are definitely some things that we're not on the same page. And that's what makes this fun.
It's to the point where I'm just like, listen, John, you are entitled to be wrong. It's totally fine with me, man. No, it's fine. I am comfortable allowing you to just stew in your own wrongness.
Well, and PK Langley just posted in our group, this idea of being gentle, right? Which is something that I have not been good at. And those of you who don't know who she is, you need to go back and listen to our podcast with her, and then go check out her stuff, because she is awesome.
Yeah, because PK is the bomb.
But it's one of those things, it's like, I'm still learning it and I'm still having problems with it, is this idea that my ideas are not always right. Sometimes I am absolutely wrong in my thought process and the way I get to where I like where I'm at, but maybe the road and where that I traveled to get here wasn't the best option. And, someone like PK Langley comes along and says, hey, how about we just give people the grace to be on their path and, offer up these little tidbits of our own little knowledge in our journey when it's appropriate, not shoving it down someone's throat, which is something that I'm really good at.
Yeah. I mean, there's all these different approaches to this stuff. And I don't honestly think, John, that you need to tailor that approach at all. I think you need to be true to who you are. And your voice is your voice. And, I have found myself at times going, I really admire the way somebody, say a Brad Jersak, for example. Man, I really admire the way that I just like the way he talks to people. I like the way he interacts with people. I like the way he preaches, because it's very thoughtful and it's informative. And you know what I mean? It's like all those things that you say. And then I'm like, but I don't want to mimic that. I like the way he writes, but I don't want to write like him, and that's the hardest thing I've had to come to terms with. And in my own writing is I had to go, well, okay, but I'm not Brad Jersak, and I'm not Keith Giles, and I'm not any of these guys. I'm not Brian Zond. I don't have, I am me. And if whatever I'm going to write is is going to have any relevance at all. It's going to be because it's my unique perspective. And so if that means that sometimes that I'm caustic or a little irreverent or whatever, I'm not going to mediate that just to try and soften the blow, if that makes sense. At the same time, I'm not being intentionally obtuse. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I understand what you're saying.
That's not my intention is never, my intention is not to offend, although I know that I do offend sometimes.
Well, and I think, my stance on some of the basics of the religion offends. And I know that. So this idea that I don't use the word Christian, I don't call myself a Christian. I know that's going to hit the mark up with some people. I know that's going to it's going to ruffle some feathers. I know that. And maybe part of me is doing it on purpose. I have to be free to admit that it's kind of fun to ruffle feathers. It's kind of fun to make people push back a little bit. But shockingly, it's not as much as I thought it would be.
Yeah, no, honestly, I agree. There's less pushback than I think I would have experienced 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, we just dropped an episode with an atheist talking about, and I don't know if you listened to the episode back. I did recently. We bashed the conservative right a lot, and I don't think
they kind of have it coming.
Well, they do, and that's part of the problem. And I think that's why we don't get the pushback that we were expecting, is because we're not just bashing them to bash them. We're bashing them with like legitimate issues that we have with what they're saying when it comes to how they connected to the faith that they raised us in, right?
Yeah,
they raised us in a faith that says Jesus loves everybody. We need to take care of the poor. We need to take care of the homeless. We need to take care of the widow. We need to take care. And then they all stand in line behind a guy who does exactly the opposite of that. And they're like, well, but right now in this moment, in this time, this is the best option. Bullshit. It's not.
No,
it's just absolutely not.
Well, and it really just brought to the forefront, if I can co-opt one of their own little phrases, the slippery slope that evangelicalism has been on for the last 30, 40, 50 years. The whole, starting with the moral majority.
Right.
Which I remember my Uncle Jim. You remember Uncle Jim used to have a bumper sticker in his car years and years ago when we were kids. It said the moral majority is neither.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
No.
I was like, they're neither moral or the majority, by the way. They're just the loudest. So Oral Roberts in the late 70s, early 80s, forming the moral majority as a political party, you know what I mean? As a group that would advance the political agenda of the church, which is still anathema to me that there is even a political arm. But, that being said, if we're to be consistent, there's enough of that criticism to go around. And I would have that Absolutely. Same criticism for anybody who wants to co-opt Jesus for their own personal little, their own little agenda or for their own little, mission. So
anyone who thinks that I voted for Biden because he was the champion that I thought we all needed will be sadly mistaken when they realize that I have major issues with some of Biden's character, some of his decisions.
Well, and we're watching some of it play out right now in real time.
We really are.
Yeah, you're the guy we thought you were, which is, just based on what we experienced the previous 4 years, maybe a slight step up. But
he's absolutely a better choice than what we had. I am not going to deny that one bit. But we have many, many friends on the left who said we're gonna call out his bullshit as we see it, and he's given us a lot to call out.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. You've given us lots of ammunition. But
I could not have stomached another 4 years with the Cheeto. I just couldn't. There's no way.
You better buckle up. You're going to get 4 more years in a little bit here.
I'm hoping and praying that the Republican side of this can come up with a better option than him.
I don't know. He owns that party. But hey, maybe we'll do this, John. We will plan. We have 3 years to save up to take our first Camino with if that happens.
Absolutely.
And then maybe just not
just not be here.
Just become nomads in Spain somewhere.
Yep.
Walk around with Alexander John
absolutely
Shia
okay with
as our
that.
guide.
Alexander John Shia, we're working on that. We will be with you on the Camino when the next election happens. Please help us make that happen. For the love of all that's holy.
All right. But so that's interesting. I'm with you. I entered into some of this. You said that we come at this from different perspectives. We also come at this from different vocations. And, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't cognizant of the fact that I still pastor a church.
It'd be kind of hard not to.
I'm just curious. I was curious in the very beginning how this would land with church members, who know me. A lot of them know me, but a lot of them don't know me well enough. And the stuff I would say on the podcast, I would never say like that in the pulpit. I'm much more irreverent in them. So I do find myself, at least in the very beginning, I would tell people about the podcast and then sort of subtly warn them, like, by the way, we do use a little salty language, So just be forewarned. This isn't, just so you know.
Can we address that for a second? Because, the joke is that I wanted the explicit on our podcast.
That's not the joke. That's the truth. I have the email that says it in writing. Dear Nat, we will have an explicit rating. No matter what happens, somebody will use the F word.
I just want it known.
I'm kidding.
Factually and right now that you drop the F-bomb more than I do.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so one of my favorite moments. So this just popped into my head though. We were talking to Kristen Dumais. Now, Kristen Dumais, very well educated woman. I don't think she uttered a profanity the whole time she was on the show, and I think and I'm not even sure she wanted to. I don't think she was like showing some kind of restraint. I just think that's probably her personality. Given her role in academia, it's probably just not her habit, right?
Right.
And we got into a little bit of a heated moment where we were talking about sort of victim blaming with sexual assault.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And we were like, I'm still offended and mortified, by the teachings of some churches, that impose this sense of modesty on women because, by God, you're just going to arouse some poor, helpless male who will have no choice.
Right.
But then to rape you. And I was like, and I think I dropped an F-bomb in that exchange. I don't know exactly what I said, but I do remember saying, like, what the actual fuck?
Right.
Like, I'm so offended by that. Like, and she didn't say anything. You won't catch this on the audio because she just, but she did give me she just sort of stopped in her tracks look like, oh, so it's this kind of podcast. So this is happening. I'm like, I'm sorry. You just got me fired up. That makes me so mad. The implication is, again, we all know what the implication is. The implication is that somebody reports a sexual assault and the first question is, well, where were you and what were you wearing and how did you comport yourself? As though any of that freaking matters.
Yeah.
I mean, you should be able to, women should be able to walk down the street wearing what they want, doing what they want. I'm not advising it. I'm just saying that should not trigger a sexual assault and be like, well, I'm sorry, you kind of, you wore the clothes.
Right.
What did you think was going to happen? I don't know. I was thinking I might not get raped.
Right.
Maybe that was the thought that entered my head. I was listening to somebody. It was really weird. It was a comedian, and I wish I remember her name. But these days, I kind of get bored with radio. And so I have Sirius XM in my truck, and I switched over to like the Netflix is a joke radio station, because it's just like sort of clip after clip after clip.
Right.
Oh, you know who it was? Oh my gosh, what's her name?
Amy Schumer.
Amy Schumer. It was Amy Schumer.
Wow, look at how I pulled that out of my hat.
Nice job. And she was telling a joke, and it was sadly poignant. And it was this point she was making was like, you don't understand like how often we women are just afraid. Like we leave our houses in the middle of the night and we run to our cars. We stick our keys between our knuckles so that in case I have to fight somebody off between where I leave work and I get into my vehicle, I might have to like you don't understand. Like this is the culture we live in,
right? Where
we're just afraid. And I'm like, you know what? That I know. And she made a funny joke about it, but at the same time, like that was a very real sense of like that's bullshit.
Well,
like that shouldn't be that way.
And as we are, we move forward in this podcast, I think we have been pretty strong in our opinion on what, the middle-aged white cisgender male, blah, blah, blah.
The Johns and the Nats of the world.
Right. And so we're pretty open about our advantages that we have in this world, right? And that we're going to use this platform to discuss the situations that other people that aren't in our privileged group. And I'm sorry for people who are in our privileged group who don't feel that you're privileged. You are, and you need to understand that you are. And the questions that come up that make you realize how privileged you really are. I don't have to, that joke you're telling that she said, I don't have to run to my car. I don't have to put keys between my knuckles.
And there's a place of privilege. Right.
And I don't have to worry about what I'm wearing when I walk out of my house. Other than,
do you remember what that guy's name was? So John and I went to a church planting conference. This seems like a lifetime ago, man. Because so much has shifted since then. Yeah. But we were in Las Vegas with the pastor I was on staff with at the time and his wife and John and myself and my wife. And we went to Las Vegas to this pastor's conference. First of all, to my eternal shame, John and I had a chance to go see Fishbone and Reverend Horton Heat, and we blew it off to go to one of these conference meetings. If I could turn back the clock.
And it was were they like $15 tickets?
They were cheap tickets, and it was Fishbone and Reverend Horton Heat.
Yeah, and we didn't go.
Fishbone.
And we didn't
go because we felt like we were there for a reason. But anyway, I bring up the conference because there was, of all the stuff we heard that weekend, of all the stuff that was absolute swill.
And it was.
The only guy that really had an impact on me was the first guy that spoke.
Miles McPherson.
Miles McPherson stands up in this mega church and has the balls to address the elephant in the room, which was the church's dealings with race. And what he said was, you could have heard a pin drop. It got super quiet. It got, and they didn't like, I don't know. I just feel like he dropped a bunch of truth bombs. But what he said in that 20 minutes or whatever he spoke, one of the things that I still think about was this sense of privilege being that of all the problems I have, privilege means that the color of my skin isn't one of those problems. So he's not saying you don't have problems. He's not saying, because I get so tired of hearing that. Well, you say I have privilege. I've worked for everything I have. I was born into a broken home and I had this and I had this and I had this challenge and this challenge. And the people on that side of the equation are saying, we're not asking you to deny any of that. We're not saying that you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. But if there was a ladder, you were born on the second or third rung of that ladder, at least. Even disadvantaged though you were in some ways, the fact of the matter is that our brothers and sisters of color can't they can't hide who they are.
Well, it comes down to a simple conversation that I know many of my friends who are people of color have had with their children, and that's how to not be black when you're driving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How to interact with the police properly.
Did you ever have a conversation with your children on how to interact with police so they didn't get killed?
No. The conversations I had with my children on how to interact with police were how to more likely get out of a ticket.
Yeah. Exactly.
So if I'm telling my kids, hey, if you get pulled over by the cop, don't be an antagonistic prick because he's probably going to write you a ticket.
Right.
Not, hey, don't be an antagonistic prick because he might pull a gun and shoot you.
Right.
Those are two very different conversations. And we certainly had the conversation about, hey, when you interact with law enforcement, polite is better.
Right. But it was exactly. It was.
But I wasn't afraid for their lives.
Right. We were giving them this advice as to how to potentially get out of a ticket, how to potentially move on with their day without having the audacity of having a little piece of paper that says they're going to have to pay a fine.
Right.
Our friends who are part of the BIPOC community are doing the same conversation, but not so they can get out of a ticket, so they don't get a bullet through the brain.
It's a very different conversation, and it speaks to the level of privilege that we have, And honestly, when I think about it, like with you and I, John, I tell people all the time, I used to say that I grew up poor. I did not.
Right.
We grew up broke. There's a very, very big difference between poor and broke, right? I don't know that I ever in my life wondered where we were going to sleep at night.
True.
Wondered if there was going to be food on the table. I didn't know that it would be food I wanted.
Right.
It might very well be cabbage or some crap that mom cooked up because we were trying to stretch a dollar. But that's the difference between poor and broke, right? So our whole lives we lived in houses. We never even lived you lived in an apartment when you were a little kid, little baby. Mom and dad's first apartment.
No memory of that,
I don't remember that. So, but you went to school. You were born into a family that genuinely loved you. A mom and dad who stayed married. Privilege. All those things are just little rungs in the ladder, the things that you and I did not have to overcome. Encouraged to go to school, encouraged to pursue higher education, encouraged to pursue our dreams. Really, for that matter, mom and dad would have supported us in whatever cockamamie plans we had, probably. And we had some pretty cockamamie plans.
Like the thing we're doing right here.
Yeah. And shout out to our dad who, on many levels thoroughly disagrees with us.
Yeah.
And yet still helps finance this podcast.
Yep.
What can I say? My parents. So anyway, I'm only saying that, first of all, just to give a shout out to Dad. Woohoo! Dad, we love you. And Mom. Mom's always the biggest cheerleader. Always. But that underscores for us, or at least it underscores for me, what an element of privilege looks like. You know what I mean? Of all the problems I've had in my life, one thing I didn't have to overcome was a shitty, dysfunctional family. Yeah, we're dysfunctional in some ways. We're idiosyncratic more than anything else. I mean, yeah, we have our foibles and weirdnesses, but
I think anybody who isn't able to and come to some understanding that they come from some kind of dysfunction, they're living in some kind of made up dystopia anyway.
Yeah,
we all come from a place of dysfunction in some way or another, and
right.
It's just how do you move forward? How do you connect with the people who cause you pain? How do you connect with people who cause you discomfort? How do you connect with people who don't think the same way as you? That's where I think we are trying to be, a little different.
Yeah. No, as I look at our list I know that John and I were very intentional, especially after we booked our first, half a dozen guests. And we had more than one conversation. We're like, dude, we cannot book yet another, middle-aged white guy on this show. So if you go back through our first few episodes, Michelle Collins was early on in the mix, and she was one I wanted to talk to right away because she's a friend. And
yeah, I mean, we had Michelle. Michelle was our fourth. Kyle Butler was our fifth. Yeah. So I mean, I think realized pretty quick that we had to be intentional.
Right, but you just read me off a list of upcoming episodes. And I think they're all women and women of color, at least a couple of them.
We were intentional on reaching out to women and people of color, right? So after that is Carol Wimmer, Sarah Cunningham, Susan Cottrell. After that is Matthew Cortman.
Yeah, but the ratio still we're like 5-1. Woohoo! No,
yeah, and some of the people we have coming up that we haven't interviewed yet are very intentional, right? We're going to be talking to people who are within the BIPOC community, which are within the LGBTQ plus community. So on one side of it, and I think Nat and I have talked about this before, one side of it's kind of sad, and the other side it's kind of hopeful, right? It's sad that we have to be intentional about this, but it's hopeful that there are other groups that are also being intentional and reaching out to people who normally don't get a voice. And our goal is to make this normal.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is it's a weird thing to say, right? I mean, every time I use words like that, it sounds so pretentious. It sounds so kind of fake to say, hey, we're trying to normalize these lifestyles.
I understand. I bristle at the word too. I don't know what a better term is. It's interesting to me that the conversation concerning, especially that community, the LGBTQIA plus, Two-Spirit, however, whatever term we want to use for all of that spectrum of people, the conversation is getting better, if only incrementally. I had a really good conversation with a friend whose son is gay, and he's a very, very conservative, reformed guy, right? And we had a really good we've had many good conversations about how he's not about to sacrifice his relationship with his son over this, Right. So he's made accommodations. I'm not even saying he's come far enough to where he thinks that, that he's not wrong or that there's not. But even so, at least that first step is, I may disagree with this, but I don't care. He's my son and I love him and I'm supportive of him. And he's like, he said something to me just a couple days ago, yesterday, maybe even, that, it's like, he doesn't know where his son, how he feels about church and where he is in the church. And he's like, he said something to him that really stuck with him. He said, there's no hurt worse than church love. No, he said, there's no worse hurt than Christian love is what he called it. And so sometimes that love gets aimed at people in a very weaponized way. Like, I love you so much, I have to speak the truth to you. I love you so much, I can't let you go fry in hell. I love you so much, I have to try and change you and put you into conversion therapy and see if I can't fix you because you're broken. I love you so much that I have to try and, you know what I mean? I got to straighten you out. Sorry, pun intended, by the way. And he's right. We've landed on a place of very judgmental love, and love is very narrowly defined. So I do like that I'm being surprised pretty constantly by people I thought I knew and who I thought I could predict how they would react. I have another good friend who I went to church with for years, very conservative, very traditional in their religious upbringing and their theology, whose daughter is openly gay and just got married. And her attitude towards that whole thing was nothing less than supportive. And I was shocked. I'm like, pleasantly so. You know what I mean? Like, okay, sometimes it has to become that personal, though. Yeah. Sometimes it has to be, and sadly we'll have Sarah Cunningham and
Susan Cottrell.
Yeah, Susan Cottrell on soon enough. But we've recorded their episodes, but they're both parts of organizations that have reached out to kids kids and young adults and people who've been cut off by their own families, who've been cast out, and who've been, so sadly, while the conversation is turning, there are still people walking around who've been pretty much disconnected from their whole families because of this issue. And for religious reasons,
And, I'm hopeful as I see, the next generation kind of come up and they kind of see through a lot of this bullshit. And they're going to be leading the way, I think, in a lot of this. And I'm really, really hopeful that we'll see kind of a change in heart, change in mind, change in spirit of the way we treat people who are generations and generations past, maybe marginalized. Oh, no, maybe. That's a bad choice of words. They were marginalized and they were considered less than, they were considered below us in some way. We were also proud to stand on this idea of coming up with some kind of equal rights for certain groups of people. But by God, they better also kind of align with us politically and religiously. And they better not be gay. They better not be transgender. They better not be any of that other, stuff. Long as they fell in line with our political views, our religious views, then we're okay with it. But as soon as they started questioning that stuff too, oh geez, then we have problems. But I digress.
Yeah, it's easy to soapbox, but those are that it actually does segue. It dovetails into, as it were, this question I was going to ask you. I'm not sure why my voice just changed. I just got all country on you.
I got all country.
I was going to ask you a question about why am I talking like this? What the hell is going on, John? I'm not even drinking. You're the one drinking.
I know.
Oh, great. You're drinking and I'm acting silly. Now, I was going to ask you, so of the people we have coming up, who are you really looking forward to speaking to?
Oh, geez. That we haven't talked to at all yet?
Yeah.
Oh, now you're going to put me on the spot and you're going to make me call out somebody that I like better than others.
Well, I mean, like I really want to we had Levi the Poet scheduled and he had to cancel and reschedule, and I'd really like to get him back on.
I really do want to, and his name has popped up quite a bit as I can't wait till that interview happens. And for those of you who are listening, we are kind of in a holding pattern with Levi because I believe he's touring now. So, which is good for him. I'm super stoked that he can tour again. But I'm hoping that at some point we can connect with him, because you know how, I mean, have we even talked about that story? That was a really weird how we connected with him. I mean, it was so bizarre. And that's kind of through Kenneth Tanner, Father Kenneth Tanner. So apparently Levi the Poet heard that episode. He wrote a poem about the episode and then tagged us in the poem. I'm like, wow, well, that was all on.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, all on Instagram. I had heard him on some other podcasts that I connected with. The Reckless Pursuit, I think is the first time I'd heard him, was on their podcast. So I already kind of has a general idea who he was. And then just one random day after Kenneth Tanner's episode dropped, I get this notice on Instagram that we were tagged in a post. So I went and read it. It's Levi the Poet writing a poem basically based off the episode we had with Kenneth Tanner. I'm like, well, I'm reaching out to this guy. And so it was an absolute yes. And then something happened. I think it's just, we had to push him out so far because at that time we were going through that whole, everyone was saying yes, which was awesome. And so I think we had to put him out a couple months. And then when the episode was ready to be recorded, he's just like, dude, I'm sorry. I just completely forgot. I'm touring. I'm not even at my house. Can we reschedule? And it's like, absolutely. Definitely. And then so I've reached out to him a couple times, and like I said, he's touring, he's busy. So hopefully at some point we will reconnect with him. But that being said, who are some of the people that I'm super interested in talking to that we haven't talked to yet? Honestly, some of the ones I'm looking forward to are people that we've talked to and they've been invited back. So Meg Calvin, I'm really excited about. Ellen Compton, who's going to talk to us about the Enneagram. That's going to be really, really cool.
Oh yeah. Thomas Ord's coming back.
Thomas Ord has just recently asked to come back for a book. I think his new book's coming out in February. Lisa Sharon Harper, who's someone who actually reached out to us, which is another dynamic that's kind of cool. Is like Nat and I are not even going to pretend to say that we understand how this whole podcast thing works, because we don't. We're just kind of going with the flow. We more often than not are asking other people, "Hey, are we doing okay? Are we doing this right?" Because we honestly don't know. We don't know if the numbers mean anything or if we should even look at the numbers. We don't know. But I would say that having someone reach out to us and ask to come onto our podcast, that means a lot to us.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's definitely a change in dynamic where for the first few months, it was Nat and I just emailing everybody that we could think of to ask if they'd come on. And so the first person to reach out to us and say, hey, can we come on your podcast? That was kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
Some of these names are people that I'm not even 100%, that I know very well. I mean, we could talk about this a little bit, that we have this private group that's connected to our podcast, right? And so we got a pretty decent size of group of people that, help us along the way. And periodically we'll reach out to them and say, hey, who are some people that you want to talk to? I mean, we would not have talked to Susan Cottrell. We would not, is that right? Susan Cottrell?
Yeah.
Sarah Cunningham.
Sarah Cunningham.
Sarah Cunningham and Susan Cottrell. We would not have talked to them if it wasn't for people in our Facebook group recommending them. I'm not saying it never would have happened.
No, but they certainly facilitated. There was a few people like Bayo Okomalafe.
Yeah.
That was a recommendation that came out. In fact, that might have been, was that Meg Calvin's recommendation? Or
honestly,
maybe it was
I don't know.
Felicia Merle.
Felicia Merle?
Anyway.
That episode became what it was, which was Felicia and
Mercy Aiken.
Mercy Aiken together because of the recommendation of Felicia, right? Felicia's like, hey,
it was the recommendation of Mercy.
Okay.
I knew Mercy. Mercy Aiken and I have been Facebook friends for quite a long time, and I reached out to her, and then she was like, "Hey, are you looking for some other voices?" And so, as a matter of fact, she's going to put us in touch with some Palestinian voices as well, because she's spent a whole lot of time in that region. And then Felicia was one who almost immediately responded to my message of, hey, let's get together and talk. So yeah, and then we ended up doing that episode with them together, which was great.
Right.
And then out of that, it's been the other thing that's been interesting is the relationship with choir that is sort of growing.
Right.
To where now Rafael Polenda is reaching out to us and saying, hey, we have an author who's about ready to drop a book. We'd like to schedule an episode with them. And so that was how we got in touch with Jonathan Foster. It's how we've gotten in touch. What did you say? You texted me the other day, so we've interviewed 18 choir authors so far?
18 choir authors. Some of them either have books coming out soon on choir or have done, like Katie Valentine obviously is connected to Heretic Happy Hour, which is a choir podcast. And I believe she And Katie, if I'm wrong on this, you can call me out, but I believe she did a chapter on the compilation book.
Before You Lose Your Mind?
Yeah. So I don't know if she's written specifically for choir other than that, but she is definitely connected to choir. But 18 people who are either authors or soon to be authors or connected to choir. 18 of our episodes. Ralph has been somebody who I've held in pretty high esteem and what he's doing, pushing the boundaries within the publishing world. And so I think we reached out to them pretty quick and saying, hey, we support you 1,000%. Anybody that you want to come on, it's an automatic yes because of how transparent and how accommodating he is with his authors. So that's always been something that we've worked towards. Obviously, Alexander John Shia and his publishing company that is in partnership with Choir also kind of falls under that as well. And I included him in that list of people because of their connection. But yeah, it's been, to say that it wasn't an awesome connection would be a lie because
it's been a great connection.
Yeah, they've been some great people that we've had a chance to talk to. Matthew DeStefano, Keith, Derek Day, all those guys are just awesome people.
I mean, yeah, obviously Meg and Michelle and Ellen Compton. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's hard to believe it hasn't even been it.
I got the list here if you want me to read it all out. I mean, this is the name of people that we've talked to who are connected to choir. Okay, ready, everybody? Here it goes.
All right, here we go. 1.
Carl Forehand.
2.
Oh, you're going to do that between each one? Don't do that. Okay.
I'm not doing that.
Okay. So we got Carl Forehand, Michelle Collins, Keith Giles, Matthew DeStefano, Meg Kelvin, Katie Valentine, Mark Karras, Ellen Compton, December Rose, Jeff Turner, Brandon Andrus, Alexander John Shia, Nick Rude, Todd Vick, Joshua Lawson, Jonathan Foster, Brandon Dragon, Jason Elam. All in some way connected to choir.
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, that's so what we're saying, Ralph, is, we're just saying it. We're just saying it. What are we saying? We're just saying. I mean, we're just saying. We're here for you, bro.
That's it. Yeah.
Who's got you back, man? We got you back, Ralph. It's been really cool. We're coming up on probably pushing people's attention spans here. So I want to ask you one final question and then we'll wrap it up. You ready? One final question.
Ready. One final question.
All right. Dream guest.
Oh, jeez.
So as of right now, you can pick anybody to have on the show and go.
I know who it is. Give me a second. Here, you go with your dream guest first. I'm going to look mine up because I want to say
you have
the
to
name
look
right.
it up. It can't be a very good dream guest.
No,
you
it
have
is.
To look
it is. But I want to say their name right.
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
I want to talk about how the orthodoxy of Scientology and how it so neatly fits within Christianity.
Well, I mean, the easy answers to that are
that's
people
a joke,
like,
man. It's a joke.
I don't know if that's so much of a joke. I think I would still do it. Wouldn't you do it?
All right,
you wouldn't talk to him about Scientology?
No, I would 100%. I'd just be afraid that he would brainwash me with his like piercing blue eyes, and I'd like.
He's like 4'2", right?
Oh yeah, but I would kneel down to look into his eyes, and then I'd be mortgaging my house to level up in Scientology. All right, L. Ron, take me away. All right, so if you could give me one person, and I'm thinking personally, just for the one person who's been the most influential, it would be Rob Bell.
Yeah.
Just because literally on like, I don't know, man, on 10 or 12 different levels, it started with Rob Bell for me. And way back before I even would have called myself deconstructing, Rob Bell was pushing boundaries. And so I've been reading his stuff and following him for, a decade and a half. And I always feel like he's kind of out front asking the next big question. So between him and Richard Rohr.
Yeah, Richard Rohr. I mean, for me, luckily, I guess I've had one of the people on that I wanted to talk to, and that was John Lynch. I mean, I was lucky enough to connect with him in a way that he said yes pretty fast. So I'm pretty lucky that I was able to get him as one of our guests, and still one of my favorite episodes. Always will be one of my favorite episodes because he's always going to be one of my favorite human beings. And the cool thing about he and I is as we move forward and our theologies differ than they did when he and I first met. He is so gracious and so okay with that. And he knew coming onto the podcast that we were going to have some differences on our theology. And he said yes anyway. And then one of the greatest moments in my life was the message I got from him after our episode, which was, "Thank you for protecting me. I know you wanted to push farther and you didn't." And that meant more to me than the whole episode, because I love the guy and I will always protect him while kind of pushing him a little bit, which we did, but nothing major.
There's ways to push without pushing beyond your boundaries and your limits. I mean, we have to know that with everybody. If I'm aware of a particular place of vulnerability, I'm not just going to push in that thing just to get it. And I'm like you. I mean, the people on my short list of people that I wanted to talk to, we've made that happen. So if I was making a top 10 list, it would have been Baxter Kruger, Paul Young, Brad Jersak, right? Brian Zond.
Yep.
I mean, okay. I'm already in my top 10 of people that I want, and I've gotten to talk to a couple of them twice because Paul's a super generous guy. But I would still love to talk to Nadia Boltz-Weber though. She needs to get herself.
She's
on
the list, and I actually was looking at emailing her again today. We haven't got a hard no, so I'm going to keep asking.
And Pete Enns
is someone and then this idea that you and I have tossed around with a couple different podcasters, right? Of doing this kind of like crossover podcast idea.
Yeah.
And so we've talked to Seth Price about doing it. He's in. We just got to figure out how to make it work and make it make sense. The guys at Shipwreck Over Safety, Dallas Verde, someone else that we've talked to. These are people I want to talk to. And one of the main reasons I want to talk to Dallas is because of his connection with and his openness about Indigenous rights. So I wouldn't say it's a person, but there's definitely a group of people that I want to talk to, and that's Indigenous people. I want to talk to people from Native cultures, be it North America. Honestly, I don't care what area we talk to these people, but I want to hear Indigenous voices. I think that's a section of our community that is silenced way too much. But on my short list of people that I really, 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 and I went ahead and emailed him, but I don't expect a response, is a guy named Colson Whitehead, who wrote, his most recent book is called Harlem Shuffle, I believe, but he's written a few books that I really like. The Nickel Boys is one of the books I recently read by him that I think would be, he's a voice that I would love to talk to. The likelihood of it happening are pretty low. Thich Nhat Hanh is another voice that I would like to, but he's in his 90s. I really doubt he's doing much at this point, but I would love to have a conversation with him. So if anybody knows him, either one of those, and can connect us, I'd be forever grateful.
Reach out, let us know.
Rob Bell is on my list. I've read pretty much everything he's written. He's definitely someone. I have the most tenuous of connections. I just need to push on that a little bit. Be like, hey, remember you said, maybe I offended him with the whole, that whole thing with Rob Bell. Rob Bell knows that guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Rob can't be. There's just no way he's a thin-skinned guy with all the stuff that
absolutely not
have to put up with over the years. So, and I think he's got a great sense of humor. So, Rob, if you're listening,
which we know,
come on the show sometime, man. Of course he's listening. They're all listening. I mean, they're all like, hey, how come I've been? We'll connect one of these days, buddy. But there's lots of other voices. There's lots of other people that, Peter Rollins would be another guy I'd love to have on the show.
Yep.
Another guy whose accent you just have to bathe in it because it's just freaking glorious. It's just,
as we get ready to wind this down, one of the things that I would just ask our listeners is, I think Nat and I are very, very, very grateful for the names that have been brought up and the help that our listeners have given to us in helping us connect with some of these people. So what I would just ask as we move into this next year, which I see as just being another great year for us, I hope, is just reach out to us with these connections. And I think Nat and I are more than willing to say yes to these names of people who maybe we don't know, but have a different point of view than us. I think one of the most important things that Nat and I have done, and I think we'll continue to do, is be intentional about the people that we talk to, and give voice to people who sometimes are silenced, and that's just wrong. So yeah, that's all I would say.
I agree. There's probably not many people who I would be like, no, I don't want to talk to that guy. Probably John Piper can go get bent. I'm not going to have him on the show. John MacArthur, like what? But those are few and far between. There's that one guy, Paul Walker. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm just naming names so we can add sound effects that are go burr, burr, and we can end this on an up note of like, hey, no actual puppies were harmed in the recording of this episode, but it has been. I tell you what, it has been one of the biggest surprises of my life how this has gone down. And what's been really fun is, and we've had this conversation on the show with many guests before, that how many people I have come to really, really love and admire and respect, who sometimes sitting down in front of my computer with them is the first time I've ever been aware of them. And all of a sudden we're having this amazing conversation. There's been way too many of those that I'm like, holy mackerel. John and I've gotten off of many of these recording sessions and just went, wow, okay, that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of joke about it sometimes with some of our guests, or Nat and I joke about it, that there's this when we have time. This doesn't always happen because we're both very busy people, but when we have time, after we disconnect from the episode, Nat and I just have about a 10-minute, 50-minute moment of like decompressing, where we just have to like kind of go over what we just heard, because it's just astounding. It's remarkable. It's like life-changing, some of these conversations we had. And some of these people, like Nat said, we really had very little idea who they were going into them, other than a recommendation, or we've had some kind of connection that we thought we kind of knew who they were, and then they kind of just completely blew our mind with the conversation. And those were, I don't want to say that it's better to not know who they are as we go into, but some of those conversations turned out to be some of the best conversations we've ever had.
Well, sometimes I do think sometimes they're better, They're also sometimes very funny because sometimes we ask them questions and they're like, you clearly didn't read my book. And we're like, no, I really didn't. I'm like, but it does have almost a blind date kind of quality to it, where you like really are genuinely going, okay, well, tell me something. I don't know anything about you. And so I think the listener, even if they're familiar with the person, they might get a perspective of hearing about them for the first time, because you and I are here sometimes. Like, I'm not leading them on questions. I'm not trying to guide them down a path. I'm just trying to go, hey, well, just tell me in your own words, what is it about? And then from those conversations, man, questions occur. And, you and I both go, oh, that I'm writing. I'm taking notes constantly when we're talking to people. And I'm just, all I really do is sit here and write, go, oh, ask him about this. Okay. Ask him about this. Oh, he made a reference to Rene Girard. Let's talk about mimetic theory. You know what I mean? And so there's a very organic feeling to how that whole thing unfolds. And next thing you know, you've had a conversation that I think if you went in more scripted, you might not have it.
Right.
So, that all of that sounds like a very nice excuse to just not be prepared. But the truth, and truthfully, sometimes that's what it is. I just haven't had time to sit down and read the book and get, familiar with the person. Usually at least one of us has.
Right.
John's usually way more diligent about having at least, I made a comment to Bio when we had him on that I had scanned an article of his, and he's like, oh, I like that you used the word scan. I'm like, well, yeah. I'm like, yeah. I literally skimmed through it looking just to kind of see what it was about. And I'm like, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I read the whole thing.
Right.
But I have flipped through it, and it was like, oh yeah, that's nice that you said that. Anyway, and as we go down the road, my reading stack just grows and grows and grows, and it never, like everything else in life.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's, I've read over 100 books this last year. I don't think and not all of them are because of our podcast. It's just in this last year, I've changed my opinion on the need to listen and read and hear from other voices. So I've been very intentional on reading books by people of color, people in the indigenous community, people of the LGBTQ plus community. So because of that, and I've been super intentional on reading books, not about them, but by them, right? And it's opened my eyes to a whole types of fiction, nonfiction that I just wouldn't have read, that I didn't even know existed a year ago. That is absolutely connected to who we've brought onto the podcast. I do have to say, I'm a little hurt that you didn't know who Meg Calvin was when we brought her on. And now it seems like you guys are like best friends. And, I've been relegated to that, that guy that once knew her.
That's just because I paid for the privilege, John. That's all it
is. So Meg, I'm a little hurt, but not that much. I mean, I did introduce you guys to each other. It's not like
right. In case that sounded like sordid or untoward, I hired her as my writing coach. I didn't pay her for her friendship. So I realized if you're not privy, like, whoa, well, that sounded weird. No, Meg's great, and we're actually I'm looking forward to having her back on the show because I had an experience similar to your experience when we interviewed her the first time, where I was out for a chunk of that interview. I had technical
is that one
difficulties.
Of the ones that you? Oh.
Yeah, I missed a good chunk of that. You guys I was like, well, y'all can just keep talking. I was having either internet issues or computer issues, so I don't remember, and I didn't know enough. That was one of those times when not being super prepared was not great because I didn't even know enough to ask good questions. I don't think. You did, you'd read some of her book. And so anyway, and we'll have Meg back on again when we can talk more about what she actually does for people like me, where she helps people who are, maybe have the kernel of an idea for a book, or even if you've already written a book but need help marketing it or whatever it is, all those other things that you need help with that you might be a little overwhelming. So Meg's a great resource. And anyway, but that's where I'm gonna have to leave it off with that. What do you say? You're in review. Hanging out with you. Been lots of fun. Come back around again. We'll do it again.
Wow. That was.
No. Bask in the glory that was that impromptu song.
I am basking. I'm basking in it.
It's sad that it's the exact same tune that I sang for Keith's episode. Catching up with Keith. I did write another line of that song. It was, how did I go? It went, catching up with Keith. Take a look. I bet he wrote another book in the time that it took to write the stupid song called Catching Up with Keith.
There you go.
Okay. Well, this has been fun. Signing off from West Texas and Nat Turney's Whiskey Emporium.
Until next time, this is not church.
Peace out.
Bye now.
Bye. Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.